Okay. So welcome to this session, Equity, Access, and Participation, Embedding Social Justice in Your Clubhouse. My name is Jaleesa Trapp, and I am a PhD student at the MIT Media Lab. So actually, what I'm having you all do right now um, with adding the three things that you value to the Google Jamboard is something that I do, that I've done in the Clubhouse, that I do in workshops. I'm also a computer science teacher, so I also do it in the classroom. Um, when I have people come in and introduce themselves based off of their values instead of their position, their title, just to show that we are all on an even playing field and that we all have shared values, we have different values. And typically, if we were in a room together, I would put this up somewhere so that we can just remember that we do have these shared values. So I'll leave that on the Google Jamboard and you all can look through. So you'll see things that other people share values with you, even though they may not be somebody from your community. You'll see that some people have different values, and this is a space where that's fine. So before I get started, I usually do land acknowledgements, and right now I'm in Boston. So I respectfully acknowledge that I am situated on the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Massachusetts people. Um, this is something that I typically do to acknowledge that the land that I'm on is, it belonged to somebody before we were here. I also like to acknowledge that without the labor of enslaved people, of which I'm a descendant, it would not be possible for me to study at MIT, and that the idea of MIT was born in the slave economy. If any of you have land acknowledgements that you would like to do, you can feel free to put that in the chat. So again, my name is Jaleesa. I am currently a second year PhD student at the MIT Media Lab, which is kind of crazy. I was a Clubhouse member in Tacoma, Washington. So I've met some of you are new. Um, Hello. So yeah, I was a member from the time I was in the seventh grade until I was a senior in high school. After college, I did go back to the clubhouse after a year of AmeriCorps, and I was the clubhouse coordinator up until I came to MIT for grad school. And I'm also a community organizer with Tacoma Action Collective. So I'm going to say Tacoma a lot. That's where I'm from. That's where all my experience is. So just get ready for that. I say Tacoma a lot. Um, And so I also want to acknowledge Miss Laversa. So she was the clubhouse coordinator when I was the member. Um, and everything that I'm talking about today, a lot of it has, it's rooted in experience from Miss Laversa. So I didn't even know what MIT was until she told me at the clubhouse. She told me about this place called the MIT Media Lab and said that it was a place that I could go if I wanted to. Uh, Nobody in my family had, my mom was in school at the time, but nobody had gone straight to a four-year college. Nobody had done anything in STEM, technology. All the stuff that I was doing at the clubhouse was a mystery to the rest of my family. And there's no way that I would have even dreamt that I could have gone to a place like this without Miss Laversa. So you'll hear me make some more references to her. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna ask you all to go back to the Google Jamboard and I'll put the link in. These are really great values. This is a cool Google Jamboard. Usually I get to see it in person, but I'm glad that we can still do that. If you go to the top and go over to the next slide, I have a question for you. And I'll put the link here. And that question is, what is social justice? So I will give you about 2 minutes to put an answer. And if you're having trouble getting on the Google Jamboard, feel free to send me a message. And I do see somebody using the pen. If you want to draw a picture, that's also fine. So some of you have already put your answers on the Google Jamboard. And it's really weird for me to do things virtually because if we're in a room, I would just have you like raise your hand. But this way, we're also able to preserve what we wrote, and I'll send you the link so you all can keep it afterwards. But if there is anybody who wants to share their answer with us, feel free, or you can even share it in the chat. You can unmute yourself and tell us what social justice is. But I know some of y'all, you guys are not this quiet.
I can go ahead and speak. Hi, everybody. My name is Jared Middleton. I'm the C2C coordinator here at the Best Buy Teen Tech Center for the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Houston here in Houston, Texas, of course. What I put in the chat was what I feel like really social justice is equality. All right. We want everybody, around the world, equal rights. We want everyone to, have peace, respect others the way you want to be treated. So that's my view on it.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to share? I see Cassandra wrote. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I knew you were going to say something. Yeah, so I just think about recognizing and correcting injustices. The first step is recognizing it, right? Because if you don't even know it's a problem, you can't fix it. So I think it's a two-part deal. You have to recognize it, and then you have to take actionable steps to correct it.
Does anybody else want to share?
I got one thing. I'm working against the systems that have been meant to separate us, and historically keep people of color at a different station than white people.
These are good answers. I'm reading all of the stuff that you're writing. Can I have one more person talk? I miss hearing people's voices.
I can share. So one way I've heard it put is like there's two types of justice. There's like retributive justice. So like if something was taken away from someone, basically correcting the offender and like making sure it doesn't happen again, like stopping them and giving them what's due to them, basically, like as a punishment or consequence. But then there's also like restorative justice, which is when people who have been put down or oppressed or somehow something has been taken away from them, doing the steps to bring that back and lift them back to where they deserve to be.
I also like using the little reactions, so feel free to use reactions. Those are all really great answers. And I'm reading what you all are writing, and your clubhouses are lucky to have you. So I'm going to go back to my screen. Sorry, this is like awkward to navigate.
I was going to make, I'll type as well. I put down, I'm very utilitarian in my view. I was like, but I'm more of like a fair distribution of resources, and
Hmm.
and to me that just looks like um, whatever the systems are in place, those resources are available for everyone who who's able to, who wishes to take part in whatever that system is.
So you saw what I wrote before I even shared it.
No.
Um, so justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society um, is like the dictionary definition. And I think that everything that you all have written ties into this. So there's so many different ways that we can do that. And thinking about how we can do this at a place like the Clubhouse. So I talked about Miss Laversa, and I talked about how a lot of what I got was from her. So even thinking about, she gave me access to this idea that I could go to MIT. And that's exactly where I am now. But there's no way that would have even known that it was possible if she didn't give me that access to even the knowledge that of a place like this existed. Because I mean, I was in Tacoma, Washington. The furthest I had been was to Michigan to visit my family. But so that's one example. So we'll keep coming back to this definition of um, distributing wealth, opportunities, and privileges. And instead of within society, we'll talk about within our clubhouse. So one thing to think about is activities. So if you are on the Google Jamboard, we're going to keep going back to this. If you go over to the next slide, the question that I have for you is what activities do you already do or do you want to do in your clubhouse around social justice? So I put the link in again. On Google Jamboard, what activities do you already do or do you want to do in your clubhouse around social justice? And this is important because this is one of the biggest things that we do at the clubhouse. Your members come in and they work on projects. So what are different activities that are happening already in your clubhouse or that you would like to see happen around social justice? And so I'm going to keep going back to Miss Larissa. So one example that I had for myself when I was a Clubhouse member, so I actually learned how to code because of a project that I was working on, and it was called What If There Were No Black People? And so it was based off of a play that I had seen before where it highlighted the inventions of Black people in the United States. And I did not know how to code before that, but I was really interested in Black history. And Miss Laversa knew that. So she suggested that I work on this project. And because I was so interested in it, I just kept going. And then I learned how to code using Lingo. I'm using Macromedia Director, which if it was today, I probably would have used Scratch, but Scratch didn't exist yet. But that was the first time that I realized that I was able um, to look at something that was in my community, my identity, and be able to use technology to share that with other people. And at the time, I didn't think of it in the terms of social justice, but it most definitely was because coding was not something that was offered in my school. There were no computer science classes. I it's not something that I would have learned at home either. And so she did give me access to learning how to code. What that led to was I interned at Microsoft as a high school student. I also got a scholarship for Microsoft, which was the picture that you saw before with Ms. Laversa. But without her helping me make that connection, there's no way that I would have ever known that. And you all are writing some great ideas. If you don't know or you are not currently intentionally doing social justice projects at your clubhouse, make sure that you look at the Google Jamboard, because people are writing down really, really good activities. And of course, I would like for a few people to share.
I'll chime in. I'll start. So on the Jamboard, I wrote about citizens opportunities that are distributed to citizens versus non-citizens or subclass citizens, and that's dealing with we have a population or groups from the um, Department of Juvenile Justice, and they're like they have maybe a scrape with the law or scrape with some mischievous event, and we're basically on track to prevent that from happening again or prevent them from graduating to other offenses. So the idea of it is to convince them with one work they do in the tech center and show them the opportunities that they won't have access to, or they won't have be distributed to them potentially in the future. And show them the unforeseen cost of like following a non-popular path.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share? You all are writing some really great things. I hope that you will share it.
I can share.
Thank you.
So I don't know if this is necessarily an activity, but I think in any of our conversations of like professionalism and the hiring process, I really like to bring up kind of how things are racialized and, complicate the idea of professionalism. And also talk about this kind of grind culture that I think is forced a lot on people of color and how we have to like self-care has to be deeper than just like going taking a bath, but like really having reflection because that stuff can weigh on you. And I think like systems of oppression are meant for the oppressed people to not do their work well. So I think in terms of career pathways as a program that I run, I really like to highlight that.
That's great. I think that's something that's really important, especially for members going to the clubhouse. They may not have these conversations in other spaces, and it may not be until they're an adult when they get to have these conversations. So that's something that's really important. Can somebody else share?
I can jump in. So I brought this up earlier on a different in a different session, but like making youth aware of different issues that impact their community. And so one specific example is I now work with youth in Southwest Detroit, and Detroit has a very stark history, a very clear history. And I kind of assumed that everyone from Detroit knew the history of Detroit, but I was surprised to kind of find out that a lot of our kids didn't know some of the historical facts around why the city is the way it is and what was going on. And they just weren't being taught it in school, or there wasn't context for it. And that was kind of surprising for me. But bringing in a guest speaker to give them a history of it was super eye-opening. And after that, a lot of them were like, I didn't even know like housing issues were the reason why this city was burnt to the ground. I didn't know that. And so, I don't think it was that they didn't want to be involved in different issues concerning that, but a lot of them just didn't even know. It's not in their peripherals. And so bringing it to the forefront of things is helpful. So that was just something that came up for me.
Somebody wrote exploring personal and social identities. Do you mind talking about that a little bit? Whoever wrote it. So, and whoever wrote exploring personal and social identity, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? because I think it's a really good one. It's okay. I'll talk about it. I think that the Clubhouse Network as a whole already does a really good job of that. And you'll see, like in the Reach Media Festival, you'll see youth talking about all different types of issues that impact them. And that's something that's really important to be able to have them connect what they're doing at the clubhouse, so they're not just learning the technology and learning how to use software and things like that, but they're able to connect that with who they are already, so that they're grounded and they're rooted in that, especially if they want to go further in STEAM, if they want to go on to a university or just anywhere professional out into the world, because a lot of times it's not rooted in who these youth are, and it could be really easy to give up. So when I went to the University of Washington for my undergrad degree, I was this close to quitting because I did not like the computer science department at all. The way that everything was happening in the classes was just not what I was used to. But the reason why I didn't quit is because Miss Laversa, you know, she was like, well, what's the issue? You know how to code. Like, I can pull up all these projects that you've done before. And like, you are a computer scientist. And so from there, I was able to just like navigate and find a different department. That department ended up being human-centered design and engineering, which was perfect for me because I was able to still code, but I was also designing and also designing for people. But without my coding experience being rooted in my personal and social identity, I don't think that I would have even, well, one, thought that I could go into computing, but two, um, think that I belong in that field. And so I think that the Clubhouse does a really good job of providing youth with that space. And if that's not something that you're already doing, that's something that you should look into doing. And, you know, look at this year's Reach Media Festival, look at the years in the past, and look at the different types of projects that youth are doing, because they're really great. And in a little bit, we'll talk about taking that one step further, but that is social justice, making sure that they're rooted in that. I'm going to switch back over to my screen. And so, I mean, there's other examples of activities too. So for those of you who went to the last Teen Summit, we had youth work on community mapping. And when we did these community mapping projects, these are different examples. The one on the left, I think, is from the Expo Center. And the one on the right is from the flagship clubhouse in Boston. And what we found was that there were so many different things that youth were already aware of in their community, things that they still had a lot of questions about, and things that they wanted to see changed. And from these community maps, we actually came up with the different themes for Teen Summit. So the different tracks that youth worked in came directly from them. We looked at all of the community maps and we grouped together the different issues that they saw. And from there, we were able to create tracks, and they got to create other projects around the things that they were interested in. There's another one. This one is from South Africa, but this was, we wanted to make sure that the projects that they were working on was rooted in who they are and also their community. So that's something else that's really important about these activities, making sure that it's relevant to them, especially we're talking about things like about coding, about engineering, about music, sometimes we give youth project ideas that have absolutely no connection to who they are or what they may be interested in. And I think that it's important to let them know that the two are not disconnected. They very much are connected, and they can be, and they can use what they know already to go where they want. So the next one is mentorship and representation. So I think mentorship is also something that the Clubhouse Network as a whole does really does really well. Sorry, I'm reading this. Does really well. I am still in touch with a lot of mentors from my Clubhouse from when I was a youth, when I was a member. I'm still in touch uh, with mentors who volunteered while I was a coordinator. And I think that's something that's really important. And I'm glad that that's already something that's built into the Clubhouse. Um, it's it's really important to talk about representation. So sorry, this is really, Zoom presentations are really awkward because I have to switch back and forth with my screen. So I'm gonna go back to my screen. And so a lot of times people talk about representation and they just talk about, oh, well, there's a Black woman who's also Southeast Asian who's vice president representation. But what does that mean? So one thing that I do a lot, and actually I did this with the South Boston Boys and Girls Clubhouse, I asked them to draw a picture of, what does a scientist look like? What does an engineer look like? Nobody drew a picture of themselves. Out of all of the times that I've done this with different classrooms, workshops, clubhouses, I've only had one student draw a woman. And even though we're doing a lot around STEM, and youth are still not seeing themselves. So, how do we change that? So one thing that I ask people is, what does your physical space look like? Do you have images up that look like the youth that you serve? One thing that I thought was really cool about code.org is that, so I also taught computer science, and code.org sent me a big packet with these posters, and there was pictures of like different women and different people with a short story about what they do, how they use code. And so I hung them up, and students would ask me about them. They're like, oh, that's pretty cool. I don't know how many of them actually went to code.org, but they saw that, and that was a constant reminder. In our clubhouse, we had so many different pictures, and I know roles are different for different clubhouses, but we had so many different images. When I was a clubhouse member, Miss Laversa actually had a picture of, it was like 3 Black women on a couch, and there was 3 little Black girls in front of them getting their hair braided. And that was something that was really cool because that's how I would get my hair braided, but it was something that I saw in a place like the clubhouse. So I'm thinking about, what does representation look like in your clubhouse? And I see that a few of you have already started adding it to the Google Jamboard. If you have not already, I'm going to give you a few minutes to add. What ideas do you have to increase representation in your clubhouse? And we're going to talk about this a little bit more about representation, but then also with helping them make connections. But it's really important that youth do see themselves, and not just see themselves in a way where it's something that seems unattainable. So one example that I give of that is Hidden Figures. I love the movie Hidden Figures. I have a picture from taking a bunch of girls to that later in my slides. But one thing about the movie that kind of left me unsettled was that what it felt like girls watching that thought that, you know, they had to be really, really smart to go work at NASA. And also, you know, like what does really, really smart look like? What does that mean? In this case, in the movie, it meant writing all these equations on a chalkboard when they're young and when they're working at NASA. But what does that mean in terms of the clubhouse? And I think that we have an opportunity to shift that idea in our clubhouses. And I cannot remember your name, but somebody spoke about it earlier about being honest about job interviews and the bias in that, and what does that look like? Those are conversations that we had with Miss Laversa. You know, we would talk about how we're going to wear our hair to a job interview. You know, she would tell us that, you know, it's okay that your hair is like this, and, you know, encourage us to be ourselves. um, Miss Larissa herself, she would tell us about things that she struggled with. So she actually worked at Honeywell in the 80s, and she was the only Black woman um, within a lot of departments at Honeywell at the time. And that's something that, you know, I still haven't seen change as much. There's, of course, a lot more representation now, but me knowing that this is something that she did. I mean, she also wore her hair like mine. I used to wear my hair in like two little French braids, but seeing her and, you know, seeing her in everyday life, that inspired me. And not just me, it inspired everyone at our clubhouse. Even, you know, the boys would see like, oh, there's this Black woman who knows how to code and she can edit videos and she's showing us how to use the music studio. And she didn't stop there. She would bring people, so friends that she had, she would take us places. So Microsoft has an affinity group called Blacks at Microsoft. We would always go to their student minority day, even though all of the other students there were from Seattle. We were the only group to come from Tacoma, but it was really important for us to see that there were Black people who worked at Microsoft. It was really important for us to know that there's a Black woman who worked in corporate at Starbucks, and she would come and talk and, you know, bring us little gifts from Starbucks. But thinking about different ways that you can show representation in your clubhouse. So like the posters that I showed, that's a good start. That's a nice way to start a conversation. But what are ways that we can really make sure that the youth see themselves reflected? Um, so thinking about things like, if your youth are really interested in music production, how can you make sure that they see themselves in music production? Yeah.
Are we opening it up? Okay,
Mhm.
so yeah, the tech center is the perfect place for it because you have interested parties in the community who have maybe a similar background to generally to the youth that are in the program, and sometimes they give their time. Sometimes it's some type of tax write-off for them or educational thing for them, company write-off for them, and we just create those opportunities with these local companies who are local groups, music groups, or photography studios who want to give back in that way, and they come in and then they share what their knowledge base is. They're not always going to be like right on like target with exactly what the youth want to follow, but them showing the interest and showing that possibility for that small group. It is really bringing more representation for that career path and for that interest level for the youth. Now that was last year, but this year it's been over Zoom most of the time because of the timing and because of the internet connectivity with Zoom. We can connect our youth who are at home to mentors who are out in the field, maybe they would have been too busy to come directly to the Tech Center, but since they're working at the office at home now, they can sort of make that hour available. That's how we're showing more people of the various representation, maybe sexual orientation, or maybe even color or race or ethnicity. They're showing maybe people, because this is South Florida I'm from, so it's islanders here. So people who are from Haitian American descent, who are representation in the STEM fields, or maybe it's something else, something similar.
I'm seeing some really good answers here, so I hope more people will share out loud.
I'll share. I'm Aviva from the Clubhouse Network, for those of you that don't know. I wanted to share that, when one of my previous roles when I was working with youth, 100% of the youth I was working with were youth of color. And then I'm this, white teacher in the room. And that can also work because I was really aware of the fact that when I'm bringing other people, what content I'm bringing in, all of those things, I made very intentional decisions. Sometimes we made decisions together where I was saying, right, like, so, because we were doing a lot of, in high school teaching, I was doing a lot of literature, and I was saying, so who haven't we read? Like, what kind of stories, but also what kind of authors do you want to hear more of? And then when I did after school activities, I worked really hard to work with organizations who were going to represent the youth and also kind of stretch their thinking, but in a way that connected really with who they are. So I think that awareness is really important. Like, whoever you are and wherever you are, you can be a force for social justice.
Hey, Jaleesa, it's chilling up here in sunny California, but what I've been able to do since we're right in the Silicon Valley, as we connect with our tech companies that are partners or that we're introducing ourselves to, when I bring on the people of color that work there, and I'm really specific, when I'm requesting that they come and share with the students as a guest speaker, virtually or in person, that they not just share their journey of how they got to where they are, but the journey of what they do and some of the challenges that they experienced, but then also how they overcame those challenges, because everything doesn't include attorneys, or a fight or a debate. Sometimes it's just an opportunity to educate and have someone empathize with you, and it's worked out really well.
That's perfect. So there are a lot of resources in different cities, and so if you are near a tech company or you are near a college, reach out because people are always wanting to volunteer their time.
Always.
Anybody else want to share? I saw something that somebody hasn't said out loud yet. Dual language in flyers and other written content. And so that was something that was really important at my clubhouse too, is to make sure that we had resources available in different languages. In Tacoma, there's a big Cambodian refugee population. Our school district, the biggest spoken languages are Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian. So it was really important to make sure that I had resources in different languages, and youth and their families see that and they're like, oh wow, they have this in my native language. I don't have to try to translate this or figure out what it says, but that's also a really great way. And then if there's one more person that wants to share, then we'll move on. You all are really quiet, but you're typing away.
I can share, Jaleesa.
Okay.
Hi, it's Astrid. Hey. I just really think that it's super important for young people to have real world experience. So they're learning all these amazing skills in our clubhouse, but how are they incorporating in the real world, right? So we have our young people submit to film festivals, submit to music festivals, go and all this. And like some of our teens have actually won like really big scholarships. And it's amazing because not only are they taking the power back by telling their own story, because a lot of times it's other people coming into our communities and telling our stories for us, but they really get to see that although they're young, they have a lot to say. And obviously we know this because we work with young people, but I think young people sometimes feel that adults don't really listen to them. And having them create something, share it with the world when no one really judges you. You know, when they're watching a video, they don't know if you're 16, 45, 80. They just know that what you're saying is super important because it's obviously something you're sharing, it's coming from within. And when they're able to win scholarships or when they're able to win film festivals, it's just so important because they get to see themselves and visualize, hey, this is something that I really can do, instead of kind of, you know, at least my experience is like you're doing all this stuff at school and you don't get to practice it until you actually get a real job. But they're doing it, they're learning all these things, but they're actually getting all this work experience. So it's really empowering to see them in that aspect.
And Astrid, I think your clubhouse won an award in the name of Miss LaVersa.
Yes, that's when I was at Expo Center.
So,
we won the LaVersa Sullivan for supporting girls in tech.
Yes, so that is something that's really important. So one thing that Miss LaVersa made sure that we did was she made sure that we knew that we were professionals. Even though, you know, I would come to the clubhouse, my hoop earrings, different color shoelaces was really popular at the time. No matter how I showed up at the clubhouse, I was a professional. So if I created something in Photoshop, she would tell me, I'm a graphic designer. If I edited a video, you are a video editor, you do video production, you're a film editor. You know, she would tell us that, but she would also submit our work. We participated in a program that was a collaboration with an organization in Seattle. And because we did that, a few of our videos were put into film festivals in California. We were in this magazine, I have to find it, but Kiki Palmer's on the front of the magazine, and you open it up and there's like all of us girls like in the center of the magazine because we were film professionals. But that was something that she made sure that she told us. So also thinking about that. So again, what I said about grounding your youth, all of their experiences and making sure that they know that what they're doing is relevant and that their identity and their community is very much connected to the technical skills that they're learning. You can go to film festivals, you can be in a magazine. You don't have to look for representation in other places because you are that representation. And that was something that was really important for me to know, that I am a professional. It doesn't matter like what my hair looks like, what I'm wearing, I am that professional. So thank you for saying that, Astrid. And so then the last thing that we're going to talk about, sorry, I'm trying to switch my screen back again. It's so confusing. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is making connections. So this is another thing that I think that the Clubhouse Network as a whole does a really good job of with C2C. And I think that we can take it one step further. And so Astrid already touched on this with making these connections to the real world. So some of you who've been on a tour with me at the Media Lab for Immersion Week, you might have met Joy. So she is a PhD student here at the Media Lab, and she's a founder of the Algorithmic Justice League. And actually her film, The Coded Bias, is actually on Netflix today. Yeah, today. So she was she was in her first year at the Media Lab, and she was planning on doing work around education, and she was taking this class, and it was a really fun class. I took the class. It was called what is it called? Um, it's called Sci-Fab. So it's a sci-fi class where you're doing fabrication. So it's exactly what you think. Like our homework was like to watch sci-fi movies and comics, and then create prototypes of things that we thought of in the class. And she was creating an Aspire mirror, and this Aspire mirror would be a mirror that you look in, and it would be like mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me something, and it can change you into like different animals and things like that. But the issue that she ran into was that the facial recognition software did not recognize her face. And it did not recognize her face because of the color of her skin. The mask that she's holding in her hand. So before she grabbed that mask, she would just have some of her classmates who were lighter skinned come and do the testing. But she was working on it late one night. She was there by herself. This Jabberwocky's mask just happened to be around, and she put it on, and it recognized the mask when it wouldn't recognize her face. And because of that, she realized that there was a bigger issue. So if you live in San Francisco, Boston, I think New York as well, facial recognition software is banned right now for law enforcement use. And it is in big part to the work that Joy did. The more she thought about it, she was like, well, this is more than just an inconvenience for me. This is an issue if this doesn't recognize me. Not only does it not recognize her, it also, actually, I'm going to show you a video. Actually, let's see if the audio will work. Can you hear the audio?
No.
No? Okay, I have to figure out.
I think when you
Yeah.
screen share, you have to share audio from screen or computer.
There's a small box. There's a small box you click to share computer audio.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing really quick so I can find it. Where is it?
So if you click the screen share, it'll open up some options, and at the very bottom, there are little tick marks that you can do, and one of them is share audio to computer. Tick that off.
Oh, I see, share computer sound. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go back to this. So it's a quick video. So Joy is also a poet. She calls herself a poet of code. And so you'll see why her project was so important in this video.
My heart smiles as I bask in their legacies, knowing their lives have altered many destinies. In her eyes, I see my mother's poise. In her face, I glimpse my auntie's grace. In this case of deja vu, a 19th century question comes into view. In a time when Sojourner Truth asked, "Ain't I a woman?" Today we pose this question to new powers, making bets on artificial intelligence, hope towers. The Amazonians peek through windows blocking deep blues as faces increment scars. Old burns, new urns, collecting data chronicling our past, often forgetting to deal with gender, race, and class. Again I ask, ain't I a woman? Face by face, the answers seem uncertain. Young and old, proud icons are dismissed. Can machines ever see my queens as I view them? Can machines ever see our grandmothers as we knew them? Ida B. Wells, data science pioneer, hanging facts, stacking stats on the lynching of humanity, teaching truths hidden in data, each entry and omission, a person worthy of respect. Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed, the first Black Congresswoman, but not the first to be misunderstood by machines well-versed in data-driven mistakes. Michelle Obama, unabashed and unafraid to wear her crown of history, yet her crown seems a mystery to systems unsure of her hair. A wig, a bouffant, a toupee, maybe not. Are there no words for our braids and our locks? Does relaxed hair and sunny skin make Oprah the first lady? Even for her face, well known, some algorithms fault her, echoing sentiments that strong women are men. We laugh, celebrating the successes of our sisters with serena smiles. No label is worthy of our beauty.
So this was important because as you saw from the video, a lot of the AI facial recognition software, a lot of the prominent facial recognition software did not recognize Black people and especially Black women. So then if you think about using facial recognition software in law enforcement to identify people, you know, what could possibly go wrong? So many different things. And it was really important that Joy did this work, but it started from her interest in sci-fi and her interest in, you know, wanting to create this mirror that could, you know, change her face into like different mystical animals. But in that process, she realized that, you know, there were other things that she could be using her skills for and not to, you know, take away from what she's interested in because she can still do that. But if, you know, if she wasn't who she is or grounded in, you know, who her family is, she might not have made that connection. And so for us, it's really important that we help cultivate that space at the clubhouse. If you know, if there's not places, yeah, there are so many layers to that, Cassandra. You know, if she didn't have this place where, you know, she was rooted in her identity and who she was and knowing more about social justice, it could have just turned into, oh man, my sci-fi project didn't work. But what it's led to is so much more than that. And we are running out of time, so I'm going to skip to the last part. So if you go to not the fifth slide, but the last slide. How do you cultivate a space for joy in your clubhouse? So like literal joy, not the person joy. That's something that's important. She was able to come about that project from working on something that she really enjoyed. Same thing for me. I was able to learn how to code from working on something that I really love to do. If you go back and look at a lot of the old videos that we edited at our clubhouse, which I will not share, they were rooted in joy. We had a really great time. Video editing was fun. Video production was fun. So what are ways that you cultivate joy in your clubhouse? Because that's also another very big part of social justice. I think a lot of times we think about, redistributing resources and opportunities and access, and people think of it as something that's like super serious, and there's no fun involved, but there is a lot of joy. So what are ways that you cultivate a space for joy in your clubhouse? And one of them that I see already, recognizing students in their work. I think that's something that's really important. And when you go to a lot of clubhouses, you see members' work all around on the walls. Um, and that's great. It also goes back into representation. It also goes back into relevant activities. Um, they get to see themselves when other people come in, they get to see what these youth represent. And I think that's something that's really important.
Yeah,
Oh, go
I'll
ahead.
chime in. Sorry to interrupt you. So the space that I occupy, I like to consider it as like the museum for the youth projects. So there'll be a space where projects are laid down that the youth have completed or are half completed, where it's like it's their space to display who they are. And the projects they work on are not necessarily they're learning a skill, but they're sort of learning more about themselves. Is this something that is it strikes me and I enjoy the activity, or if it's not, and it's a relief to find out if something isn't for you as much as it is for you. It's like, oh, music's not for me, or it's not hitting me in that space. And a lot of what I do here, what some people don't like, some you maybe like it, some you don't, but I make them uncomfortable with what they get to try out. They don't. Some youth come in with a preconceived notion or assumptions of what they should be doing or should be studying or should be learning, and I try to disrupt what their normal learning menu is, just so they. And sometimes joy comes from that, and sometimes you just give me a dirty look. For the most part, I think it worked.
No, that's great. So if anybody's ever heard the story about when I first went to the clubhouse, I did not want to go. My aunt made me and my younger sister go because we would be at home by ourselves after school. But when I got there, I saw that The Sims was on a bookshelf. And I was like, ooh, I want to play The Sims. Miss Laversa was like, okay, but you have to work on a project before you can play games. So I just started like distorting faces with this software called Goo. And I was like, joke's on her. Joke was on me because then I learned Photoshop. Miss Laversa always made us try new things. I remember we were taking apart computers and like looking at the different parts on the inside. And Miss Laversa's like, who wants to take apart computers? And all the boys are like me. I did not raise my hand. She's like, all right, come on, Jaleesa. I was like, I did not raise my hand. And she was like, come anyways. If you don't like it, then you can, go back up there and finish what you're working on. And then halfway through, I noticed that I was the only girl who stayed in there because I was actually having fun. So yeah, definitely encouraging your clubhouse members to try new things. Somebody wrote listen really big, and I think that's also something really important because Miss Laversa would listen to us. And even though we didn't make the connection right away, she did. So she knew that I liked to build things. Like I would go in and play with Legos all the time, but I didn't think that I would like taking apart a computer and building it. But she made that connection and I did like to do it. So making sure that you listen to your youth, but also, using your own discernment and think about things that you can do to help them make those connections because they're not always able to do it on their own. So it is 1 minute past time, but I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope that you all keep this link because you all put some really great ideas into the Google Jamboard. So all the pages are just full of new ideas that you can take back to your clubhouse. And I just want you to remember that when we talk about social justice, it does not always have to be reactive. That's usually the context that we think of. We think about going to a protest, and I protest all the time. I'm a community organizer, but protest is usually in reaction to something that has happened. But all of the stuff that we talked about today is things that you can do every day at your clubhouse. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And I'll stay here if there's other questions that you have.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
Thanks, Jaleesa.